In 2024, we used AI in just about every single branding project, from creating stock imagery to GIFs, video, and more. Using these tools has helped our team and helped our clients by showing them the possibilities of what otherwise we wouldn't be able to create. So I've linked a ton of examples in the blog. Go and see those. But I want to tell a kind of a quick story of how that came to become a little bit more of a contentious conversation on social media. Greetings and welcome back to the fifth time I've now attempted to record this podcast episode because tech is not teching today, but that's not an excuse. We've got to get this out. It is the most hotly anticipated podcast episode of the entire year and your guys' favorite from last year. So without further ado, the 2025 trend predictions for design, branding, and marketing. This is in blog format. I took 3 weeks to write it. It is very detailed. There are over 100 links in the blog. It was a 19-page Google Doc. So if you're more of a reader, mkwcreative.co/blog will take you there. But we're going to dive into it and hopefully get through the whole thing with no issues. Here we go. Of course, the time has come again to grant you with our yearly trend prediction report for branding, marketing, and entrepreneurship. Last year's predictions, as I mentioned, were a huge hit, and so many of you messaged us to let us know where you saw these trends materialize in real life. So I hope you do the same this year, as I think that these 4 trends that we've narrowed in on are going to be quite evident and quite possible for 2025. Of course, we can't see where we're going if we don't know where we've been. Brief little recap of 2024. Q1 2024, most notable thing that happened for us was the bingo card scene around the world. In the first week of 2024, we accidentally started a bingo craze on the heels of my sister, who's been doing bingo much longer than me, and she'd kill me if I didn't say that. But posting our goal-setting bingo card on TikTok got us over 1 million views, and on Instagram, 800,000 views, which was insane. So many of you purchased the Canva template for $2.24 and made your own versions that we actually offered our first ever accountability mastermind for 12 lucky applicants. We met each month all year to share our goals and celebrate our wins and game plan for all of our challenges. And if you want to do the same this year, there's now a 2025 bingo template available at the link in my bio. It's $2.25. Of course, you can use the 2024 one if you want, but if you want the 2025 design, it's there for you. And there's 2 other goodies as well available for download. In Q2 for 2024, we saw Beyonce's Cowboy Carter, Taylor Swift double album Torture Post Apartment, the latter of which inspired our viral merch drop for Dental Hygiene Nation's Tortured Dental Department merch. Hugely successful there. Go see it on our website. Followed shortly thereafter by Sabrina Carpenter's Song of the Summer, Espresso, Please, Please, Please. We had Charlie XCX. We had Chapel Roan. All of these things we know. Q3 of 2024 became like the Love Island Summer Olympics madness in Paris, France, which was capsulated in our podcast episode 173, Olympics Predictions. That was before I got to go to the Olympics, and really kind of see how all the brands activated and how sports became part of the conversation, and really how standout stars like Ilona Maher caught our eye and captured our hearts. Brat Summer was in full effect thanks to Charlie XCX, whose neon green aesthetic was very quickly co-opted by the Kamala Harris social team, who let the memes flow faster than coconut water, if you get the joke. In the end of 2024, Q4, the year really rounded out with a very anxiety-inducing election that proved just how segmented our media sources have become. And I will have a lot more on this topic later. But it also proves how podcasts are as important as ever, as reaching voting age audiences really depends on where you get your information from. Simultaneously, we've been holding space for the lyrics of Defying Gravity in anticipation for the record-smashing second part of the musical in 2025, first part happening right now. Adaptation of Wicked, of course, with Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. Now, we get into the actual trends. There are 4, just like last time. In order to understand trends, we have to understand how trends happen. Trends usually happen on a 25 to 30 year lifespan cycle because the youngest people that are coming into the trends did not live during the time of the trend. Therefore, it gets kind of reimagined for a new generation based on them kind of pseudo-discovering something of times gone past. Nothing is new and nothing is original. So if we keep these things in mind, we can see how these 4 trends really come from a basis of art history. So art history nerd here, that is my degree. And what that means for culture and art and communications into a new year, a new era. So the first trend that I'm putting forward for consideration is what I'm calling serving hunt with an H. And this really, I wish I could take full credit for on the name, but I did read it in the comments section of this incredible video by the creator Mark Sebastian F. doing a fashion show through Bass Pro Shop. However, this doesn't really negate the fact that I think we're going to see a full lean into this aesthetic, not the way that you're thinking. So I want you to put yourself mentally in the space of a Bass Pro Shop, in the space of like a hunting store, because that's where we're going to start. The aftermath of the 2024 election and the reality of another Trump presidency really left a lot of big lessons and possible paths for trend predictions. So go back and listen to episode 186, Branding Lessons from Presidential Campaigns. There's lots of juicy stuff to go over from that. But I think in 2025, we have to get ready to see more women, LGBTQ, and minority occupy conservative spaces and reclaim them. So we saw this first with the kind of old money aesthetic, which is very similar to our projects like Lily Par and Sistered States, and how this look brought people into the country club sports. So instead of just straight white men in golf, tennis, pickleball, and other country club sports, we had more women, more LGBTQ, more minority representation in those areas. Similarly, when you see the trad wife phenomenon taking off and the Ballerina Farms expose, which really doubled down on the fetishization of regressive, conservative, straight white values, which come steeped in privilege, white straight men stay at the top of this socioeconomic food chain, which excludes everybody else, especially the childless cat ladies, from the possibilities of achieving the same kind of success or acceptance from the culture. So imagine if we flip the script, much like the hashtag women in males fields trend that's popping off. We've spent so long as a culture creating safe spaces for people who felt othered, which I think should remain, absolutely should stay. But imagine if strongholds of conservative culture became places for girls, gays, and theys to thrive. We've seen this happen already with more women and LGBTQ people take up guns after Trump's win, saying we need to protect ourselves. That article is linked. And creators like this trans gun influencer that I found on YouTube that really bucks all the stereotypes of gun ownership, but does so in a responsible and ethical way of teaching people how to behave around guns. Their profile is at Tactical Girlfriend on YouTube. While I'll never be an advocate for guns specifically and personally, I will always support ethical, safe, and practical gun education regulation for all. I think what's most fun about the possibility of this trend is really occupying the look of the hunting aesthetic, but putting forth a more progressive and sustainable and inclusive agenda. So when I envision the origins of this trend, this is the first trend that really, for me, floated right up to the surface. And I thought immediately to the super iconic Tyler Mitchell 2020 Vogue cover of Harry Styles in a dress in the middle of the field that sparked major backlash from hyper-conservatives. Candace Owen saying, bring back manly men, right? So what these images gave us was a way to challenge gender norms and make traditionalists uncomfy and make that part of the conversation. And I think we've seen more men embrace the more feminine side. And on the flip side, more women and minorities and LGBTQ feel comfortable presenting more masculine as kind of the blur of those lines becomes part of the culture. From there, we pick up with Chappell Roan and her instantly iconic Rise and Fall of the Midwest Princess, destined to be Spotify Hall of Fame, Lollapalooza Hall of Fame with their insane numbers that she did. Always the adage is 15 minutes of fame is 15 years in the making, and she's proof of that. But her queer-themed heartbreak ballads and earwormy pop anthems really are complemented by this camo hat, which later was then parodied or copied by the Harris Balls team, right? Chappell has continued to wear the Bass Pro Shop-esque camo patterns in her campy glam way, and she has fellow indie pop comrade Remy Wolf doing her own version with the sexy villain camo merch. So really kind of seeing all of that play together in her music, in her music videos, her performances as a really good representation of this trend and kind of bringing that middle of the country aesthetic to the coasts and vice versa, right? Bringing a more coastal, and when I say coastal, I mean California, New York kind of mindset, liberal mindset into the middle of the country and what that looks like vice versa. So where I think you're going to see this is in branding and design, camo print. Duh. So reading up on the history of camo is quite interesting. I linked that in the blog, but think neon orange, tactical gear, antlers, utility pockets, plaid, boots, camping, fishing, color palettes that are earthy, muddy, ochre, amber, these earth tones with pops of neon and sparkle, of course. But this trend relies deeply on pattern. Plaid, tartan, houndstooth textures like wood, stone, wool, steel, clay, and twine, really important. We want weathered, we want textured, we want things that have been used, not things that are like sparkly brand new, but have like a ruggedness to them. You'll find fonts that use older rustic sign painter style and more of that like Scottish English pub feel. So it could go like definitely Americana hunting values, but kind of harkening back to even an older hunting style that is kind of more of that nostalgia for like a manly, like rugged, outdoorsy person. Think also of workwear brands like Levi, Carhartt, Wrangler, Dickies, etc., and what could be rendered logo-wise on like a butt pocket of jeans. That's kind of the branding that I want you to think of when it comes to this trend. For photo and video, the style here is really rustic, moody, outdoorsy, with plenty of grunge textures, as I talked about, offsetting the obvious sarcasm of the message, right? So think the set design for the SNL performance by Chappell Roan of She Gets the Job Done. Almost all the subjects in the scenes that are these like serving hunt kind of like aesthetic is going to play on the obvious androgyny and the gender bending of disturbing conservative norms. So think like iconic drag queen like Patagonia in full drag at the top of Half Dome, for example. Print, out of home, and in person apparel could be a really interesting way to slip into this hunt aesthetic. And I think we're going to see that with kind of the resurgence of print. I have that in a lot of the trends in this report, but I think as people are getting more offline and brands are struggling to continue to reach their consumer through all of the ads that are existing on social media, that print has a chance to really make that difference. In-person events like gun safety classes, hunting weekends, mountain retreats, and shooting range outings might become more popular with the young and the restless. Brands might also create more bandanas, patches, hand tools, anything that feels like Girl Scout, Boy Scout adjacent could become really popular in 2025. Take a peek at our Pearly Whites Ranch theme box that we designed for Dental Hygiene Nation in 2022, or 2023 rather, which was maybe ahead of its time, but that kind of look. In fashion and culture, Vivienne Westwood is obviously the classic player in plaid, as seen most recently on Taylor Swift's outfits and her possibly lost album aesthetic, ? Other high fashion notables in this category would be Thom Browne and the gender bending of the pleated skirt, the uniform, the androgyny of a dress shirt, those kind of things. Chloe, season summer and spring 2025, also on the same wavelength. On a consumer level, Boys Lie, LL Bean, Abercrombie and Fitch dropping a hunting camo hoodie, which when I saw in store was like caught my eye immediately. Like, okay, so this already like made it up through the ranks and got approved enough to be in store. What is this saying? You know, other blue collar workwear could continue to be popular. So the Carhartt barn jacket. There's an article, "What's the rise behind the barn jackets?" An interesting read. But the hunting aesthetic could lean more English or Scotsman huntsman when you consider that Outlander gets a new and final season in 2025. The same network, Stars, also greenlit another book-turned series called The Hunting Wives, which in 2025 will feature a female protagonist who moves from the big city to a small town in Texas and takes up shooting as a hobby with her fellow socialites, which leads to, quote, obsession, seduction, and murder. Very continuation of the themes of Saltburn, if you catch my drift. I think that fits under these categories quite nicely. Brands that could really do this soon. My brain first went towards like food. Snackle boxes, vegan jerky, things that look one way but are actually something different on the inside, or things that are different on the outside but are really traditional. And the playing with the contrast of that, the duality of things that could be presenting as like woodsy or outdoorsy, but really have more of a sustainable, progressive agenda on the inside. Unisex fashion brands wanting to play in a new aesthetic playground could embrace a more outdoorsman upset. Alcohol brands that have previously only catered to men could start to cater to female, minority, and LGBTQ audience, scotch, whiskey, beer, etc., by upsetting those gender norms and making a beverage that's more inclusive. That's the whole first trend. So that would then summarize our serving hunt aesthetic. That's trend number 1. Done. Clocked it. Trend number 2, crafted comeback. So Not to make it political again, but that's the world that we live in. Trump's proposed tariffs on imported goods have the potential to drastically increase the cost of living for just about everyone and everything. So much so that small businesses are already scrambling to buffer against inevitable price hikes. If everything imported becomes more expensive and supplies for small businesses become more expensive, we can anticipate a revival of the craft, upcycle, recycle scene and its corresponding aesthetics simply because Americans won't be able to afford new things and will already be reworking what they have. So when we look back at American history, there's a strong correlation between economic inflation and craft core. 3 time periods really come to the forefront of this. The oil crisis, 1973, 2008 recession, 2020 pandemic. So oil crisis, 1973, high inflation, stagnant economic growth. Things getting more expensive, everyone getting paid the same. If that doesn't sound familiar, it should. Many people then looked for economical ways to obtain goods and express themselves creatively. DIY became not only a method of saving money, but a practical necessity for many families, and coincidentally brought us the chronicles of DIY craft queen Martha Stewart and her Turkey Hill home, which is shown in great detail in Netflix's Martha documentary. Highly recommend. Magazines, books, television shows in the 70s also taught ways to live frugally and meaningfully with less, which happened again in 2008 with the Great Recession, when economic hardship led to a surge in upcycle and handmade craft culture. So craft sales, recession related. Etsy was actually founded in 2005 and exploded during the recession as a way for buyers to connect with makers of handmade and homemade goods that were unique, affordable, and personal, which led to help support more independent artists. There's a great How I Built This episode about Etsy that I would also recommend. It is linked in the blog. The third, the pandemic, the crafting boom. Crafts really became a mental distraction from the solitude of being quarantined. And many of us picked up new hobbies simply because we had the time to, and we weren't spending money on movies and experiences and dinner and going out and being in the community. Knitting, crocheting, quilting, painting, drawing, even sourdough bread making had a huge boom, as we know, during the pandemic. In 2025, crafting, even upcycling thrift finds or junk journaling, becomes a response to over-consumerism. You want to really take a look at this, you can search on TikTok under consumption core and an effort to bring sustainability to the forefront. The wastefulness of fast fashion, as shown in the Buy Now documentary, which I would also recommend, and other consumer industries, has a profound impact on the planet, especially with climate change. Upcycling and crafting give new life to otherwise discarded items, and craft items also thrive on imperfection, collaboration, and the joy of making something instead of just having something for stuff's sake. So this is kind of the rejection of the machine, rejection of mass made, rejection of mass produced, and embracing things that are craft and are local and are handmade. To get us into a crafted comeback aesthetic mindset, put yourself visually, again, we were in Bass Pro Shops, and now I want you to go next door into Joann's Fabric or Michael's Craft Store circa 2000, right? So thinking about textiles, thinking about softness, my mind first went to Ambram Jensen's woven looms and tutorials for visible mending. Pinterest is also reporting a huge uptick in craft-related queries with small bead bracelets up 2,000% and crocheted bow bag up 975% in fall 2024. Credit where credit is due here. Taylor Swift definitely having some influence, as many of her friendship bracelets adorned the era's tour goers, of course. So raise your junk drawers, locate your needle and thread, start stitching because you're about to see this everywhere. And here's exactly how I'm envisioning it come to life. In branding and design, a crafting comeback aesthetic means a continuation of a lot of popular 2024 styles. Funky pastels, garden-adjacent color palettes, hand-drawn, imperfect, and intricate letter forms. So Rosie Seinko is a really good example of this. Floral motifs, checkers, gingham patterns, ruffles, raffia, yarn. This trend is about leaning into the eclectic collector's drawer of treasures and putting any combination of these little tchotchkes together to make something new. I had a really great interview with miniature artist Chelsea Makes on episode 152 of the podcast. That really encapsulates what we're talking about with craft and with kind of this smaller, intricate, handmade, imperfect quality that this trend evokes. Craftcore design is meant to be layered and textured and detailed. In photo and video, I think we can emulate this crafty style with derivatives of many forms of mixed media: drawing, sketches, video, animation, GIF, etc. There are videos like Elena_T, her art journal, which is layered on top of travel video clips, which is just so effective. It's so perfect for this trend. And I Am Danny Ellen's TikTok process, where they're taking a video, printing it out, animating it frame for frame, stop motion style with real acrylics and pastels and markers, and then reanimating it as video, and how satisfying it is to see the process and then the final result. Crafty photos and videos are visually maximalist, which means we're leaving no surface uncovered. Coffee tables, dining tables, bedrooms, floors, like beads everywhere, brooches, jewelry, fabrics, just like a craft explosion, right? Better yet, digital collages, as launched by Pinterest Shuffles app in 2022, could become popular again. Shuffles, I think, kind of got lost in the shuffle, to make a pun. But I made a lot of videos about how Pinterest Shuffles is such an easy tool to use to do digital collage and retain the backlink to the Pinterest where it came from. And I think that's a great way to make really dynamic visual content that doesn't feel too produced. Don't be surprised if you see a 2025 version of the new Martha Stewart in all forms of social media. Think Meredith Hayden, Wishbone Kitchen, Brittany Jepson, House Lars Built, and Kelly Mandel of Studio DIY, and how they continue to serialize their content on their own channels to further cement themselves in this like crafty hall of fame. And treating yourself like a full-time network show, even if you don't have full-time network backing. And I think people that do crafts well will continue to grow in this kind of way. For print, out of home, and in person, craft is about tactile. Anticipate that brands are going to use craft aesthetic to embrace physical print. Again, getting back to that kind of print renaissance. These brands exist beyond the screen, and we're going to find every way to push the materiality of what they have to offer. Stickers, patches, handwritten note cards. I found this incredible article on Upworthy about a restaurant that gives you a pen and a note card at the end of the meal to write yourself a letter in 1 year's time, and they will mail it to you in a year. And I think that's a perfect example. Embroidery, screen printing, I think will also be quite popular 2025, especially as brand activations. A crafted comeback movement would leverage in-person events like workshops, community nights, makers markets, and bartering. So like trading things for other things instead of paying for things. Heck, even crafting circles could go so far as to be the antidote to the dating app. As Gen Z's new go-to New York City date night mixes booze with crafts and eliminates awkward hangouts with activities and art and liquid courage, of course. In fashion and culture, alongside arts and crafts movements, we always have arts and crafts interior design and fashion aesthetics, which really reject the machine in favor of something maximal and ornate. Creators like Mila Textiles craft and make you really unique and exquisite, like hand embroidered ties and bags and hats that are just so like visually dense and visually appealing. Clothing rentals have also gained in popularity in recent years with services like Nuuly. I'm a huge fan. With over 300,000 subscribers, I'm one of them. Rent the Runway and others have become a more practical option for swapping wardrobes instead of continuing to buy new clothing. Nuuly is also going to be launching a thrift option as part of their business model as a way of liquidating final sale clothing. Again, begs the question of why do you have so much final sale clothing in the first place? Like, why are we continuing to crank out 40,000 new items a year as Anthropologie, Urban Outfitters, and Free People? And could you make less that's better quality? But that's, again, antithesis to capitalism. So at least on the back end, when they liquidate all of that stuff, there's an opportunity to rent it before it goes and sits in a landfill in a foreign country. Again, band-aid to the problem, but at least it's a band-aid. The secondhand apparel market is also predicted to reach $264 billion in 2025. And reselling can actually be a quite profitable income generator for most. There's a 22-year-old that made $100,000 selling on Depop. There are plenty of brands that are already doing this maximalist craft aesthetic that aren't thrift and that aren't upcycle, but have the same visual quality. So I want you to take a peek at these when you get the chance. The eye-bogglingly beautiful Villa Palladio Jaipur leaves no surface uncovered. Every single inch of that place is decorated, and the visual of that is really scratching the itch of this crafted comeback look. Fashion brands like Farm Rio, La Double J, and Ulwalia, which I just found recently, whose season spring-summer 2025 runway featured pieces like tops and dresses made out of doilies. That's exactly what I'm talking about. It very much summarizes this aesthetic. Brands that should do this soon. So brands that could really benefit from craft-inspired rebrands be the ones that really lost their humanness along the way. Dating apps come first to mind as something that is so deeply personal that's become algorithmed and impersonal. Shopping concierge services, movie recommendation services, pieces, things that kind of create that I made this just for you and no one else kind of quality, I think is really going to be part of what a crafted comeback aesthetic means. A craft comeback is also a way for artists to showcase their craftsmanship. So bring us more carpenters, more ceramicists, more textile artists, blacksmiths, leathersmiths, especially ones that use unconventional materials in a recycle or upcycle way, and can also educate their audience on how to do the same. A craft resurgence could lead to more craft beer, craft coffee, craft everything in a very hipster, Tumblr, late 2000s, early 2010s kind of way. The thriftier that we get, and the more that we're going to see home recipes for not only food, but cosmetics, household items, skincare, etc. Creators that can teach and educate others will gain major traction, and tech apps that can celebrate independent artists and resellers like Pinterest, Etsy, Depop, Poshmark, and others might see a rise in popularity, which could also lead developers to create more competitive apps and platforms. I'd love to see another platform pop up that really celebrates small artists and maybe bans bigger businesses from being on the platform altogether, which would be quite interesting. That's what would basically sum up, for me, the craft comeback aesthetic. Martha Stewart, Joann's Fabrics, multimedia, anything that has that depth to it, and also the reusability as a trend, I think is going to be a great thing to keep your eye out for 2025. Now, take everything I've told you so far, throw it out the window, because trend number 3 goes in a totally different direction to a luxury sense. So we're getting beyond like common pop culture, and now we're ascending to a level of luxury and exclusivity, and what that means in 2025. And what I'm calling the do not disturb deluxe aesthetic. Doom scroll, push notifications, group text, screen time, eye strain, neck tech neck. So many of these terms have come about in the last decade as ways that our addiction to our screens have led to taking a toll on our bodies, our minds, and our mental health. So much so that travelers are actually going to extreme lengths to avoid scrolling altogether. The ultimate luxury in 2025 will be turning it all off and going off the grid, taking no pictures and telling no one is going to be the ultimate form of luxury. According to a recent study, adults check their phones an average of 58 times per day, which is not enough if you're an entrepreneur or a social media manager. 1 in 3 Americans believe they spend too much time on their phone, and 68% of people polled believe that having too much screen time has led to a decline in their mental health. This is not news to anyone. The antidote to this addiction, however, might be sending yourself to tech rehab. Tech-free trips are on the rise, from hotels with no Wi-Fi to multi-day retreats with no phones allowed at all. And wellness getaways are actually poised to dominate as a travel trend in 2025. Although the American Psychiatric Association does not consider phone addiction a medical condition yet, it wouldn't be a far stretch to think that it could happen in 2025, and that more adults will turn to the travel industry to help break their vicious screen time and reset their nasty habits. This also goes hand in hand with what I call medical tourism. Medical tourism is not necessarily a new phenomenon, but European elites have been traveling since the Renaissance era to great distances to enjoy healing properties of Roman baths and other wellness destinations. But we saw a huge resurgence of this post-COVID as healthcare costs increased and quality of care declines. More than 2 million Americans travel abroad every year for medical tourism and cite that the cost of care is being significantly cheaper than what they could find at home. Everything from hair transplants to dental, plastic surgery to real life-threatening medical cancer care and other types of care. Global medical tourism as an industry is set to reach $112 billion by 2030. So it should be a shock to literally no one that it will continue to grow in 2025. For those that can afford, big asterisk afford, those that can afford to get a break from their devices, a do not disturb trip could go very deluxe in 2025. Hospitality brands already do this exceedingly well for a very high price point. So Six Senses Hotels allows you to enroll in a sleep wellness program while you stay at their property. And Amman Resorts has wellness immersions, and Canyon Ranch wellness reset programming. These are all examples of how there is an attraction to, or a dangling carrot of, the idea of being offline and being tapped into your health as luxury. Proof in the pudding. Expect to see Roman bathhouses really take off more in 2025 with brands like Ira Ancient Baths gaining popularity as phoneless places for relaxation. You are not permitted to have your phone in any of the bathing areas whatsoever. The biohacky Andrew Huberman, Peter Attia worshippers could also be responsible for Oregon's sauna scene being better than ever before. And across the pond, Auberge Resorts is going to land in London in 2025 with a 2-floor spa-inspired Roman bathing experience. Lastly, Forbes notes that 25 dazzling new hotels that are going to be opening in 2025, almost all of them have some element of a wellness offering, which leads also into wearable tech. I think the wearable tech industry is still on the rise with companies like Oura Ring and Whoop gaining in popularity a lot because they don't have a screen on their display. Brands like Yonder, which allow you to put your phone into a neoprene pouch, to enjoy and be more present in live performances like concerts, comedy shows, etc. I think all of these will continue to become popular as ways to get people, again, off their phone, off their devices, and more present in their experience of whatever they're attending. Where I think you're going to see this in branding and design, first and foremost, is with color palettes. Pinterest is reporting an uptick in serene color palette searches, up 110%. So you can expect brands that embrace this trend to zen out on neutrals, beige, earth tones, sandy colors, airy colors, and textures that you might see in that bathhouse idea: bronze, silver, water, stone, tile, earth, ceramic, marble. The Do Not Disturb Deluxe aesthetic is biophilic in its design, but pulls inspiration from Greco-Roman antiquity. So statues, columns, baths, domes, arches. Fonts and logo marks are going to be very clean. They leave a lot of negative space to breathe. And they have kind of corresponding line work and illustration that is measured, symmetrical, methodical, and pleasing to the eye. For photo and video, Do Not Disturb Deluxe aesthetic carries same themes of symmetry, purity, simplicity, and stillness, but there are no quick cuts. There's no special effects. There's no harsh color edits. And instead, there's more of a low contrast, slow motion, smooth camera maneuvers, and an airiness that feels kind of like you're floating among clouds. In print, out of home and in person, to really feel elevated and luxurious, the print materials have to be so minimalistic in their layout and really use and utilize those matte, soft textures that are pleasing to the eye and easy to be around. These brands will find ways to take everything that we do on our phones and make them analog again. Wellness journals, sketchbooks, written agendas, soundscapes, reflective natural surroundings to look inward instead of on screen in moments of boredom. In-person workshops ranging from yoga and meditation all the way to sleep and silent events are going to be for the super hardcore, right? So there's a great article. I went on a 7-day silent meditation retreat. Here's what I learned, not me personally. It's from the point of view of the person that went. Definitely worth looking into. In fashion and culture, the wanderlust for being phoneless might hit an all-time peak as White Lotus Season 3 kicks off in 2025, which is going to be set in Thailand and reprising the spa owner Belinda as the connecting character from Season 1. Themes of wellness, relaxation, luxury, minimalism, and I believe, rumored, religion, ethics come into play. Obviously, with White Lotus, there's always a murder mystery theme somewhere. But the brands that will continue to do this well are the ones that cater to those themes of relaxation and Zen and mindfulness. Brands that do this already quite well are fragrance-forward brands like Aesop, Necessaire, Way, and super hyper luxury Loro Piana, known for world-class cashmere, fine wools, and those really muted, soft, chill, relaxed, tech-free kind of textiles and brand options. Brands that could really embrace this do not disturb approach in 2025 would most obviously be the travel industry and travel creators. I'm so curious what it would look like to send a travel creator on a trip where they weren't allowed to bring their phone and they still had to create some kind of content that recaps the experience of being in a place without having to see every single detail and see 45 Instagram stories every single day. Food for thought. From large chains to boutique finds, luxury Airbnbs and other hospitality offerings, tech-free wellness experiences should be an absolute upsell for the traveler who's, again, not interested in being online and scrolling as part of their experience. Social media apps could also take note by introducing more features that encourage healthy limits and boundaries with their tech and devices to make them more dumb over smart with less on-screen functionality. Again, inversely related to their goals of making money. But I wonder if people would pay a premium to pay Instagram to only work for 2 hours of the day instead of 24. Don't know. Event planners, communities, and corporate retreat companies could create opportunities for connection without phones. And fitness and wellness professionals can obviously offer wellness and mindfulness options that encourage do not disturb. Brands that we've worked with in this space would be similar to like Inlight Hyperbarics, which offers various modalities for healing. And it would be really interesting to see how brands continue to not only encourage, but require phoneless interaction and what that does for attendance, what that does for engagement, what that does for brand perception. So that, in summary, would be your Do Not Disturb Deluxe trend forecast, trend prediction. Keep your eyes out for it. If you see it, send it to me. Last, and certainly not least, monument or make believe. This is the last trend that we have on deck for 2025. And it wouldn't be a trend report without, of course, touching artificial intelligence, augmented reality. I'd be shocked if any of the trend reports you've read on the internet didn't incorporate AI in some respect. Our team's first foray into AI image generation was actually all the way back in 2021 when we did the San Diego Open Tennis Taking Over San Diego campaign. Thanks to the insights that we gained from my conversations with everyone's favorite podcast guest, Lauren Devane from the Bemuse Studio. So start with episode 117 if you haven't yet, and then episode 133. Episode 162, and then we just recorded an episode in the high 190s with Lauren. And she'll teach you all about the advancements of different apps and programming that can be utilized to really bring the picture that you have in your head to life. So we're blending that reality with make-believe. And in 2024, we used AI in just about every single branding project, from creating stock imagery to GIFs, video, and more. Using these tools has helped our team and helped our clients by showing them the possibilities of what otherwise we wouldn't be able to create. So I've linked a ton of examples in the blog. Go and see those. But I want to tell a kind of a quick story of how that came to become a little bit more of a contentious conversation on social media. I'd posted what looked like oil paintings of cocktails on a tennis court, for example, for a project. And one of the responses I got back was, you could have hired an artist to do this. And my education to that person was that would have never happened in this part of our process. So these images were created as part of the discovery process of this brand. There's no budget and or need to include an oil painter in the first phase of discovering your brand. But what it did do is it gave my client something to say, oh my gosh, I would love something like that for my store when we open. So it now greenlit a possibility for her to go source an artist to say, will you create me an original that looks similar to these that I'm putting forward, that match my brand, that match the vibe, that match the visuals, when otherwise there's a chance that conversation could have never happened, right? So keep that example in mind. It's going to come up again in a second. The world's biggest brands have been cashing in on the ability to make things feel monumental for a long time now. Suspending disbelief for just a moment and employing a trompe-l'oeil-like scene and cartoonishly oversized version of their signature products in major cities around the world has been something that Jacquemus started back in 2023 with their giant bags driving through the city of Paris. If you remember those, this is all created with CGI. Maybelline's mascara tube on the tube video. So if you remember the subway car coming into the station and it looks like it's wearing big old lashes and then the mascara spoolie goes through them. While some consumers are really annoyed by this type of content marketing for tricking them, I think in 2025, we're going to see brands that turn these comically gargantuan faux brand applications practical. And this is where my trend prediction comes into play. Some of these brands already have. So ahead of the Eras Tour coming to Vancouver, the BC Place Stadium added mammoth bracelets all the way around their venue. It looked like they were just plopped right on top of the building to scale, right? Like huge scale. And New York City's famous Fifth Avenue and Paris's iconic Champs-Élysées were graced with Louis Vuitton's new storefront, which is their signature suitcase motif to scale with latch closures, handles, buttons, etc., zippers in huge proportions, skyscraper proportions. Also in New York City, the Highline Pigeon nests itself as another example of larger than life. And the hot new bombshell on the Las Vegas Strip, of course, the Sphere with the 360 approach to possibilities of brand advertisement. As we continue into 2025, don't be surprised if you all of a sudden feel like you've walked into a scene from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, because that's exactly how I felt looking up at the giant Louis Vuitton suitcases and seeing the brand, seeing myself as small in comparison to the brand, and what that meant for my perception of the product and what that means for the psyche and how the brand chooses that as a way of artistic expression, as a way of marketing, as a way of advertising. Do we exist in the world because of brands, or do brands exist in the world because of us? Kind of that dynamic, I think, is an interesting thought piece. Generative AI is what really is going to give all the businesses of all size a chance to flex their creative muscles and push the limits of what's possible for brand installations. So, although not practical in all instances, we predict that more brands will be able to take the tools to greenlight their vision for gargantuan practical builds in ways that evoke genuine shock and awe from spectacle seekers. So, just like my example of the oil painting to then greenlight hiring a painter to create an original piece, think of these AI tools as ways to show your client, what if we did a giant version of your logo as this? What if we built a giant blah, blah, blah of your product doing that, as ways to really visualize it and then start to break down like, okay, what would this look like to bring to real life? Great example of this, the Wicked movie. Instead of using CGI sets, director John M. Chu had Shiz University, Munchkinland, Oz, and the Emerald City train built practically, which is an incredible feat for anyone. But in a world of like purely CGI films and actors that have been on blue screens and green screens for decades, this feels weirdly cooler to know that it was all built practically, right? And it keeps audiences reeling for more, like we're craving more, that kind of thing. Here's where I think you're going to see this in 2025. In branding, expect to see more companies play with texture, size, and scale. This is not new. Artists like Christo and Jean-Claude have been fabric wrapping installation art in the 60s and 70s around all kinds of landmarks, from the Great Wall of China to full-on islands. There's so many examples, Champs-Élysées, there's so many examples of huge, large, impressive installation. But I think more brands are going to take this creative license to drench their most notable landmarks in all of their brand colors, font styles, patterns, and motifs. Creative directors are going to be seeking out more ways to make their brand's products larger than life in commercial displays, pop-ups, and in-person experiences. And generative AI apps like Adobe Firefly and Creo allow more users to create believable logo illusions that mimic real-world textures and add depth to your design work. There's a really great example of this. Burberry posted a reel of the Burberry logo on a bunch of different textures, presumably textures that they sell in store because they're Burberry. But there's a way as a brand that you can start to emulate that kind of thing to show a more omnipresent brand than just existing in one dimension or just existing digitally, right? So taking that digital experience and making that real life. What's more important here is the consistency between what you're making and the world that your brand operates in. So resist the urge to make something just because it looks cool, but make it because it's going to contribute to your brand storytelling at large. In photo and video, there's lots of ways that content creators can play with proportions. So the creator Vine.fits, linked in the blog, creates collages of their outfits of the day, unlike anything I've ever seen, with like huge hands or huge heads or huge purses that exaggerate the thing that they're putting forward to the forefront. And artists like Rafik Anadol and Alva.skog, both linked on the blog, incorporate AI in their working process, creating pieces that assist or entirely create scenes made by machine. AI-assisted video is growing at lightning speed. As of today, we officially get Sora in ChatGPT, which is a generative video AI. And it gives creators more ways to delight and surprise. So we anticipate that this will lead to more brands experimenting with unexpected animation, similar to the ones that are linked here on the blog, which are Hermes and Le Double J animation, which create architectural animation similar to, there's a few more creators here. Their handles are so long, but you'll have to click through and figure out which pieces really speak to you. But it's basically about taking things that exist in real life and animating them in a digital way that kind of suspend that disbelief or introduce magic in a very like Disney kind of way, of a delight and surprise, blending real and not real. For print, out of home, and in person, this trend really takes over with the brands that have the funds to do so, of course, to make those gigantic installations happen. So these put the consumer in the context of the brand world that's being built and allows for that heightened experience of that product. And I think this is just going to continue to break barriers of the traditional 2D advertising in 2025. Some people might say this is bordering on like late stage capitalism, brand plastering all over everything, nefarious activity. But I think that in a lot of ways, the brands are giving way for artists to create large scale installation as well. So I think of all the teams that are involved in something like Wicked or something like getting the Louis Vuitton exterior set up, right? And how much of that bleeds into both directions, from the artist to the brand and the brand to the artist, etc. I think there's a lot of room for both to exist, while being ethical and while being aware of the consumable implications of making large scale art. For fashion and culture, comically large and exaggerated features, I think, will remain at the storefront if we follow the lead of the December 2024 Marc Jacobs cover for Vogue, which features Kaya Gerber in cartoonishly exaggerated accessories and enhancements. In fact, the entire Marc Jacobs collection really follows suit, showing uncanny proportions and clothing that looks so cartoonish that it kind of catches your eye in a way that you can't tell if it's been made by the computer or not. As mentioned previously, almost all the major fashion houses have attempted their take on larger than life marketing, but in 2025, I'd like us to see them put their money where their mouth is and make them real. Brands that should do this soon. Although exciting, the rapid changes in AI cause a decent amount of ethical, environmental, and private security concerns. We cannot talk AI without talking all of these things. Cybersecurity hacks, personal identity biometrics, and digital exploitation, so Donald Trump's AI version of Taylor Swift, for example, are all on the docket for deep discussion and legislation in the next year. I had a really informative conversation with Claire Zhu, episode 168, Kiss My Aesthetic podcast. I definitely recommend going back to that one. There seems to be a lot of work to be done in the education space around AI, VR, and AR. The first online educators that can create a comprehensive AI media literacy course or education framework in 2025, I think will make good money. In the same way that we had to educate about cybersecurity, and then we had to educate about social media, and then we have to educate about all of these different ways in which your identity or your life can be compromised by technology. Someone who can effectively teach media literacy is going to be a sought after expert in 2025. Other businesses that could really thrive in this 2025 monument or make believe trend would be installation artists, muralists, sculptors, set designers, people who have the opportunity to meet the market needs by bringing those visions to life in visual merchandising, sculptural installation, event design. I think will really make headway. And that's where it kind of comes all together of how can we as lay people and creatives be of service to our clients and ethical under late stage capitalism? Like, what does that look like if the patrons of the arts are consumer brands? So if you think of how art has evolved and how all of these trends and everything that we ever have seen ever has evolved, the art that gets made is a result of the hands that hold the money. So for a lot of human history, that's been the church. We did not get art documented and preserved and maintained because the artists wanted to. It's because the church had the money to pay the artists to make the thing. So that shifts as people move away from religion to corporations. Corporations hold the money that pay the artists to make the thing. So I think that, again, as so many things are on the docket and so many conversations are being had about trends and 2025 and politics and all of this stuff is like things can grow on parallel tracks. And to consider how creativity grows, you cannot divorce it from economic and capitalistic trends and happenings. The two are very intertwined. And so as much as it's fun to talk about new aesthetics and this and craftcore and like it is very much a recycling of the economic machine that then encourages you to spend money. And I want to just call that out before wrapping up this whole blog. I want to say end rant, but that's not the end. In conclusion, there are just a select few trends here and themes that we're anticipating in the new year, but this by no means is everything, right? I'll be keeping a Pinterest board for the whole year. And I also love it when you guys send me stuff on Instagram that you see that matches the theme, matches the aesthetic that we've talked about, because I like to save them into folders and then prove myself right. But more sub aesthetics and trends are definitely going to come across my theoretical desk. The main takeaway here is these two consistent things. So here's some do's and here's some don'ts when it comes to everything I've just shared from this episode. Do lean into transformation and take creative risks that challenge norms. Is your brand ready to embrace a bolder, more inclusive version of itself? Can you take traditionally exclusive aesthetics and make them a place where everyone belongs? In the spirit of 2025, reclaim and having ingenuity with your design and with your marketing and with your consulting and with your offerings. It's really, this is your invitation to be a part of it, right? So taking things, being a true artist is about taking things of different realms and mishmashing them together. And I think that's true now more than ever, right? Also, don't shy away from materiality. I think there is a tendency to want to go all in on, I got to make all this content and I got to make all this digital and all these posts and all these videos and all this. Like, don't be shy to get back to the core of the human tactile experience, events, textures, handcrafted details, things that don't have to be done to the 1,000th degree, but can be one of one. Find a way to explore the physical, the tangible side of branding and bring your designs to life in a meaningful way, whether that's on huge scale or very, very small scale. Don't be shy from that. Don't feel like there's an imposter syndrome or that there's a performance that needs to happen because it's made in real life and not made without the aid of tech. If you made it all the way to the end of this gigantic 5th attempt podcast recording and all of the anecdotes, and you're still staying curious for what's next, I thank you for listening. If you want to listen to more podcast episodes, like I said, they are all listed and they are all linked in the blog post, mkwcreativeco.com/blog. Also, you can find this podcast anywhere that you listen to podcasts and also on YouTube. So if you're listening to the podcast version, come join us over on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. I'm also on TikTok and Instagram. Feel free to reach out if you're ready to implement any of these trends for your brand or you liked this kind of topic material. Please don't hesitate to reach out. We are booking projects for 2025. We'd love to work with you. We hope that these inspire some extra creativity or at least some creative thoughts on your side for you and your teams. And with that, I think I'm signing off. Catch you guys next time. Thanks so much for listening. And thanks for being here. Happy 2025.